Okay, so we have a bucket full of questions here. This was a last-minute addition, so thank you all for playing. And I know there's a few people with questions in the front, so I'll take 2 questions from the bucket and then 1 question from the front. I think there's runners with mics, and then we'll get on with that. First question. Why am I taking away sports credit? I think one of the things we're doing is taking away the boutique tax credits that went for playing sports. And one of the reasons for buying sport equipment to a certain amount of financing. The fact is that we think that simplifying the tax code is a good idea, but more, we feel that giving more money to the families who need it and giving less to the families who don't is a really important thing. That's why we brought in a new Canada Child benefit. Many of you will have noticed that as of July this summer, you got a little extra money in your monthly child benefit check. That's because we know that it's a powerful way of helping out families with monthly bills without having to worry about getting back money or paying money at tax time. And on the same time, dealing with the fact that we have a whole bunch of kids living in poverty, and if we increase that child benefit, we could lift hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty and lower child poverty by 40%. So governing is about choices, and we think giving money to all parents in a means-tested way was more important than continuing to advantage narrow niches that might be good for votes, but isn't necessarily helping people who need it most. There's a few people here with questions, and I'm happy to take these questions too. The implicit question here, which I'm sure is around pipelines, because that's something that people are asking about. A few weeks ago, a little more than that, I was at an event where I got challenged by some young people. I was happy to be challenged with them and by them. But I did something that I wasn't necessarily proud of. I allowed the people who were shouting loudest to ask questions. And there was a really thoughtful young woman who sent me an email the next day saying, I had a really important question to me, but I wasn't shouting and waving a flag, and you didn't answer my question. So I promised myself not to reward bad behavior, but I think there's a very, no. There are people who are behaving nicely and pointing out that they have very strong feelings about this, and that's a great part of Canada, and it's a really important thing. So I am going to address their question, because that'll allow us to move on to other questions. One of the things, if you've been following politics and some of the things I've been talking about over the past few years, you'll know that I refuse to make a choice between what's good for the environment and what's good for the economy. I think if we're going to build a strong future for our kids, for our grandkids, and an economy that grows enough for us to help each other out and create opportunities, we need to be thoughtful about how we're creating jobs and economic growth. But we cannot do that without protecting the environment, without moving towards renewables, without engaging in a robust transition off fossil fuels. We just have to do those both things at the same time. And that transition is going to take more than a day or a week or even a single mandate. So what we have to do is create jobs and protect the environment. Now, adding a pipeline is consistent with reaching our climate targets. And the reason why, even though that's counterintuitive, is that Alberta has put an absolute cap of 100 megatons emissions that they will not go over. There is growth to be had in the oil sands. They will be developing more fossil fuels while there's a market for it, while we transition off fossil fuels. So the question is, how do we want those fuels carried to markets? Do we want it to go through rail, which, as we know, is more expensive, more emitting, and much more dangerous, both for communities, for the environment, and for individuals? Or do we want to do it in a safe, modern way? Now, I know there's lots of people who disagree with me on this decision, and that's fine, and that's fair, and you're allowed to. Governing is about making difficult decisions and knowing that when you make a big decision, there are going to be people on either side of you ready to leap on you if you don't make the right decision. But I'm making a decision that I truly believe will help us both in protecting the environment for the long term and easing that transition as we get off fossil fuels by making sure that people have good jobs and are able to feed their families right across the country. And quite frankly, that's something that I'm very comfortable with, and I look forward to working with people to manage and mitigate the very real fears that a lot of people have about what might happen. That's why we've done significant things around oceans protections, why we've done significant things about bringing in a price on carbon, bringing in a phase out of coal plants, which Ontario led the way on. These are things that is all about deciding to do the right way, and this is the way that we're going to be doing it. Thank you for that implicit question. I'll take one more question, and then I'll go to the floor. Oh, that's the child sports tax in the same handwriting. Okay, someone's very passionate about getting that rebate for hockey equipment for their kids. The child benefit, and if you're a teacher, you qualify for it, because I don't think you're making more than $200,000 a year. The child benefit will actually be more than the refund you're going to get at the end of the year for hockey equipment. And it helps more people, and that's sort of where I'm lined up. Here we go. Alia wants to know, what is the single most important outcome you wish for students to get out of our Canadian education system? Ooh. To think critically. You know, teaching used to be about memorizing facts. It's now much more about understanding. It's much more about being able to decipher what the answers you get on Google actually mean and know how to draw who you believe on and when to not trust Wikipedia and when to question whose sources these are. To be constant, flexible, engaged learners. One of the things that I figured out early on, and it's actually one of the things that led me into being a teacher, was that I'm the kind of learner that has to be engaged every step of the way in what I'm learning. If I don't understand something, I won't remember it. And it made me the annoying kid in class who always put up his hand and said, oh, sorry teacher, can you re-explain that? Can you engage that again? But I learned reasonably early that if I didn't understand it, there were at least a few other kids in class who didn't understand it either. And as a student, I was sort of a middling average student in terms of grades, but it was because I was lucky enough to be able to listen and absorb very, very quickly the information given to me, which is very useful as I'm going through the massive briefs I have as a Prime Minister now. But it made me very, very active and focused on understanding. So one of the things that I always look at is ways to challenge, or I continued to looked at as a teacher, and I continue to look at, is ways to challenge common sense or expectations. And I loved using logic puzzles and math problems to get people to think differently. There's a number of them. The Monty Hall goat problem that some of you may know is a great one. There's the classic of the three traveling salesmen and where's the dollar. Those are worth looking up, but they're too long to explain here. Simple one. You imagine two steel rails, 1 kilometer long, placed end to end, anchored at either end. Hot sunny day, the steel rail 1 kilometer long expands by 10 centimeters and pushes against the other, and they have nowhere to go but up. Now, thinking about it, 1 kilometer long rail, 10 centimeters of expansion, how much up will those rails go? Can you sort of show me with your hands how high you think it might go? The answer, of course, is as high as exactly, we got someone with big hands there, as high as a 4.5-story building. It'd go 14 meters up for 10 centimeters of expansion over 1 kilometer. And what that actually does is illustrate in a really tangible way the power of the Pythagorean theorem, the power of what exponents can actually do. And challenging people to face their misconceptions or their expectations and see that reality is actually different from that, for me was always a really, really neat trick to sort of wake up students. The other thing that I found with focusing on understanding, on making sure our students understand how to think and engage with the world, was the fact that I still remember not every occasion that a teacher lied to me, but a whole bunch of them. I mean, there are teachers, when I think back, that I remember best only because I remember the time they told me something that even at the time I couldn't fit into my worldview. I remember a religion teacher who, when I asked, why Noah was able to live to 900 years, he said, without missing a beat, it was because in the olden days, the earth spun a lot faster. Okay, and it's slowed down since then. And, leaving aside how horrifying that might be to a kid to know that the earth is slowing down so much that it might tumble off of its axis, it's actually not even astronomically correct. It'd mean the days are shorter, not the years. But anyway. Or the other one, when I had a teacher say to me, who was trying to teach how to read the time on an analog clock. Of course, we didn't know back then it was called an analog clock, but you have to teach the kids now. And had the little hand at the 4 and the big hand at the 9. And wanted kids to guess 4:45, but of course I pointed out that no, wouldn't it be closer to 3:45 because the little hand is closer to 3? And she said to me, well, no, because the clock actually jumps from 4 to 5 in one shot. I'm like, really? That's how clocks work? And it was just to shut me up, but it stuck with me because, like I said, the annoying one that asks all the questions. But it stuck with me. So, as we think about, when we're teaching, how we're engaging, really think about the understanding, how they fit into what they have as a worldview, as an understanding, because that's, anyone can learn something by rote to respond in a test. But if you actually understand what's going on around you in the world, in your place, in the substance matter that you're learning, you're going to be able to hang on to it a lot longer and eventually embarrass those teachers in front of a room filled with their future peers. No names, though. Okay, let's take a question from the audience here. Here we go. Do we have mics here somewhere? There he is. Okay, yes. Okay, will you go with you? You're standing right there. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, I have a question. I teach science, and the whole focus and inquiry in my school. Now, I have a little bit of understanding about the government last year. I spoke to a retired scientist who told me that a lot of the scientists they lost their job. You can hear? So
no,
a lot.
She's saying here. She's saying it's a good, good to you to point out that a lot of scientists lost their job. It's a good thing that you're pointing it out. It's not a good thing that they lost their jobs. Sorry, I'm going to stop now and let you finish.
Okay, so.
Let her finish the question, please.
Okay, thank you, sister. Now I'm a little bit nervous.
That's okay. I'm assuming the question is about the importance of scientists and how we need to make sure as a government we're encouraging science. It's a pleasure to answer that question right here in the riding of our Minister of Science, Kirsty Duncan, member for Etobicoke North. We're committed to evidence-based policy. We're committed to understanding the facts and the data that underpin. That's why one of the very first things we did was restore the long-form census. Which obviously matters. But you can't, when you fund science, it doesn't mean you're always going to agree with every different scientist out there. And what we need to do is make sure that the science is always going to be top-notch, is always going to challenge us, and we make the decisions that we can based on scientific knowledge and data and understanding, and that's exactly what I'm focused on trying to do. And that's why we believe in science. I mean, as opposed to a government that picks its answer and then tries to fit the facts to fit that answer, I think it'd be a better idea to actually look at the facts and then try and fit an answer to fit the facts as best you possibly can. Okay, another question. I'm supposed to pick it randomly, but that kid who came up was so cute. Do I believe that current progressive discipline strategies are adequately addressing bullying and violence in our schools? Great question. First time I encountered bullying as a teacher, well, I was actually a camp counselor, and I had a kid who was a little bigger, a little slower than the other kids in my cabin, and he came up to me one day, middle of the summer, and said, "That's it, I'm going home." I said, "Well, what do you mean you're going home?" "Well, I've been bullied mercilessly since day one that I got here." And I'd been their counselor for about 2 weeks at that point, and I had no idea. And that's when I realized that it's, I was someone who, I'm a friendly guy. I listen to people. I engage. I thought I was a really good counselor. And it turns out I was completely missing the fact that one of my kids was absolutely miserable and the others were being mean to him. And from that moment on, I really understood. And when I became a teacher, it was something that was really, really important to me as well, to make sure that we are alert and open and engaged in a constant way with bullying. It's something that no one person can solve, but it's something that we all need to work on together. Students need to be able to support each other and understand what's going on. Teachers need to be active and present in looking for the signs and engaging with it. Parents need to be involved in the solution. Society needs to set the right examples and call it out. There's general bullying, there's specific bullying around particular issues, whether it's the LGBTQ2 community, whether it's other challenges of minorities or communities that are often too marginalized. We have to be extremely sensitive to the unfairnesses that can cause, quite frankly, scarring throughout not just a school career, but one's entire life. We like to think of ourselves as a society of good people. Well, sometimes we have to be really vigilant in making sure that we are active and engaged. And the fact that we've been talking about it as much as we have over the past years is really important. The fact that there's a discourse around motivations and understanding why bullies are bullied, that doesn't at the same time, our bullies don't excuse it. This is an issue that, quite frankly, I've been in the House of Commons for the past few years, so that's not a good place to look for examples of being nice and polite to each other. So I know, and I've watched from a distance, from a political and policy lens, all the great work done in schools, in school boards, and across the country on addressing bullying, and I'm just happy to encourage it and continue to ask people to continue to push on it, because we do not want kids to grow up with a total lack of confidence in themselves, submitted to violence, and not knowing that, yes, it does get better, but it shouldn't be bad in the first place. Thank you very much. Okay. Long question. Well over 60% of voters in the last election opted for parties that support electoral reform. Now the committee has come back. Why don't we ignore the recommendation, since an election is a kind of referendum, and begin now to implement a system similar to New Zealand's? Electoral reform is an issue that is important to me. It's important to a whole bunch of Canadians across the country. It's one that not every Canadian is involved and aware of or passionate about. People are not always as plugged in on the intricacies of political questions as they are on issues of am I going to be able to pay my mortgage, where are my kids going to find a job, how are we protecting the environment, how are we building for the long term. But electoral reform is an issue that's really important to me and to a number of people. And one of the things that we decided to do, on top of having all the town halls and consultations across the country, on top of having an electoral reform committee do work to try and figure out if there's a consensus among parties on a way to move forward on electoral reform. There doesn't seem to be. There seems to be a consensus around maybe a referendum from some parties, but that doesn't get us forward on what kind of system might actually suit the majority of Canadians, because there wasn't agreement on that. We're actually sending out, as of this weekend, postcards to every household in the country that will allow you to go online and fill out a survey that talks about your values, talks about what kinds of governance, what kinds of electoral system might you want. It's not, type A or type B or from a long list of different styles, but what are the values that underpin it? Do you think that diversity should be within political parties or across multiple political parties as represented in our House? Do you think that there should be a direct link between an individual MP and a specific geographic area? Or do you think that MPs can just be accountable to the party that generated the list they're on? Various questions like that will get at to what really underpins what people want improved in their electoral system, which for a large part is people want their votes to count better. They want their choices to be better reflected in both the makeup of the House of Commons and the kind of legislation that's put through. And they want our government and our parliament to do a better job of reflecting the full range of diversity and identities that Canada comprises of. And those are the questions that are top of my mind as we move forward on figuring out how we're going to move forward on electoral reform. And it's a challenging issue, but it's one that I am very, very much taking seriously. Another question from maybe someone on this side. I think there's mics over there. Is there a mic over there? Do we have a mic over there somewhere? Okay, well then grab someone who has a mic, has a question with a mic. There you go.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier Président.
Premier ministre, mais c'est très gentil.
Monsieur le Premier Ministre, je m'excuse. Elena from my park, Alternative. Katimavik was such a wonderful program for our youth. Is there any possibility to bring it back and when?
Great question. Katimavik was Canada's national youth service program. It took kids from communities across the country and sent them to 3 different small communities, usually in different parts of the country, where they'd work on local volunteer and charitable sector jobs, 35 hours a week, to discover how they could make a difference in the world, to make a difference in the world, and to learn more about Canada and themselves. It was a great program that I was chair of for a number of years. And then when I kept seeing that it was really hard to find a champion for youth in Parliament, including in the Liberal Party when it was in government, although I did use some personal connections to convince Jean Chrétien to increase the funding for Katimavik when it was. We never really had a youth champion in Parliament. So I decided, well, that was one of the factors that went into me deciding, okay, if I can't find a youth champion in Parliament, maybe I'm going to have to create one. And I decided to run for Parliament to bring youth issues to the fore. So one of the commitments that we've made in the election platform, one of the commitments that I'm working on, because I'm not just Prime Minister, I'm also Minister of Youth, is to bring in a national youth service program. And how we do that and how we make sure that it includes a Katimovic-style component, but also a lot of other choices for kids who want to serve locally, who want to serve after school or on weekends, who want to take a summer off, who want to serve on environmental themes or on justice themes or on different things. There should be options, but the bottom line I see is that any kid who puts up their hand and says, I want to serve my country, should be said, here are your options, let you serve your country, instead of saying, yeah, we don't have a program for that right now and there's no funding for it. So that's very much my goal. We have a mic and a question over there in the corner. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you for coming to speak with us today. So everyone give him a round of applause. My question is around equity and social justice. Our union is an equity-seeking organization and supports equity and social justice issues. As a white straight male, how do you use your privilege and status with those of us who do not share that status and have experienced personal and systemic oppression since and prior to Canada's establishment as a democratic country?
Wonderful question. When I was doing my B.Ed, we had a class called, it was Sociology of Education, and it was exactly around all that. And I remember this exercise where, as a class, we generated a list, a binary list of pairs in terms of power dynamics. White versus non-white, male versus female, straight versus LGBTQ. Q2, all the way down the list. And when we ended up that list, generated on the list, we all had to look at wealthy, non-wealthy, all those sorts of things. Central Canada versus BC. I mean, that was one that BCers put in on that one, but it was UBC. We went down the list. It was a classroom-generated list, and I realized that of the 20 or so different pairs that we had on the list, I was on the power side of 19 of them. The only one I wasn't was youth versus age, and I knew I was going to get there eventually. So it was an extraordinarily powerful wake-up call for me. This idea that, like it or not, we're in a society where I was given power and a voice that I did nothing to earn, that I did nothing to deserve, other than ended up being born luckier, unfairly than everyone else. And the reflection that I had on that, I actually ended up writing a free verse style reflection on being a straight white male. But the essence of it was that if I am lucky, and I am, then I have a responsibility not to go around hanging my head and beating myself up for being lucky, because I didn't pick it, it just happened, but that luck comes with a responsibility to wield that power in responsible ways. And the best way to do that is to use the power that I was given for unfair and unjustified reasons to empower those who are not empowered by our society. That question came up a whole bunch of times throughout my political career. How can someone who was born at 24 Sussex, okay, and given so many advantages in life, how can I possibly represent Papineau, one of the most economically challenged ridings in the country? And the fact is, I said, I will listen, I will learn, but mostly, and on top of that, I will put the fact that I have a more powerful voice than most in service of people who need powerful voices on their side. And it's something I need to be constantly reminded of and challenged of, and we have a lot of amazing people in cabinet, a gender-balanced cabinet, by the way, reminding me of that all the time and challenging us, because there's so much we don't see. within patriarchal systems, within white privilege, within all these things that we do not unpack every single day. And being able to do that responsibly is something that we continue, and I continue to struggle with. But fundamentally, as Canadians, we're lucky they're the 99.5% of everybody on the planet. And the way we need to look at this is that luck comes with a responsibility to do better, to do right, and to show the way for people who are less lucky. Over there, I haven't taken a question from there yet.
Hi. Oh, hello, everybody. My name's Andrea, and I'm a Section 23 teacher. Thank you. So for those that don't know what Section 23 is, I teach a kindergarten class for mental health. My students are challenged with post-traumatic stress, behavior challenges, mood disorders, and I not only support these five-year-olds, but also their families. So my question for you is, how is Canada prepared to support these families with their variety of challenges and support those who support them?
First of all, in the name of all Canadians and everyone in this room, thank you for the amazing work you do. But from having had the amazing privilege of having worked with some kids with particular challenges and some extreme special needs, I can say that at the same time as I'm thanking you, I'm also a little jealous of you because I know how amazingly rewarding and awesome it can be to work with those families and to make a difference in lives that need so much support and quite frankly don't get the kind of support that we'd love for them to get. We have a lot of work in this country to do to continue to invest in making sure that everyone has a real and fair chance to succeed, that everyone as a family has the support they need to raise their kids the best way that they can. And I'm not going to dig into, I'm a Quebec MP, so I'm very sensitive to provincial areas of jurisdiction, so I'm not going to weigh in on a particular provincial system. But I am going to say that we need to do a much better job as a country in supporting you and supporting families, in looking at, one of the things that we're doing is we're bringing forward an Accessibility Act. I've asked our Minister of Canadians with Disabilities to consult broadly, to look at all the various challenges that people have out there, whether they're physical or mental or emotional or what have you, and create an Accessibility Act for Canada that is going to do a better job of breaking down barriers. But there's always more to do, whether it's supporting parents who have kids on the ASD, whether it's or supporting institutions that will actually make sure that when the young people graduate or turn 21 and phase out of systems designed to support them, they don't become a burden for their parents for the rest of their lives, which is quite frankly increasingly the case. So there's a broad range of things that we need to do, and all I can say is that I'm very much aware and mindful of the great challenges out there and hope to be able to work with you and all of you and with provinces to make sure that we're giving everyone the supportive environment and the opportunity to fulfill their potential, whatever it may be. Thank you. I think we're going to have to wrap up because you guys have a day full of stuff. And there was one question I wanted to ask that nobody asked me about my classroom management style. So I'm going to quickly answer that one just because I can pretend it was in there somewhere. One trick I learned that stuck with me forever, and you guys may know this, it was known as, at UBC anyway, as the law of minimal intervention. If a kid's disruptive over in a corner, you don't bring the whole class to a screeching halt and shout at them, Johnny, sit down and pay attention, because you've disrupted the entire classroom environment. Don't intervene when a pause will suffice, or a glance, or maybe not even that, maybe you just walk through the aisles and get a little closer to them. Look at how you can disrupt the ecosystem minimally as possible to improve the environment, the outcomes for all your students. And that's something that I try to bring into politics. Now, Elbowgate, I had a bad day apparently, but in general, not intervening overly heavily is, I think, what we can all agree governments should be doing. There are places and there are ways in which we do need to weigh in and shape and have consequences and boost and improve, but allowing for balance and respect and self-development as we evolve is something that I've always tried to keep to. And a big part of that is learning constantly, being challenged constantly, and that very much is what you've all done for me this morning. I want to thank you for your questions, for your attention. Merci beaucoup. Have a wonderful day of learning, of challenging yourselves, and thank you for everything you'll do for our kids and our future in the coming years. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.